19 years old and already a ghost story, parents told their kids at night. That was Maya. In the small, gray town by the sea, everyone knew who she was, and usually, they crossed to the other side of the street when they saw her coming. She wore her attitude like a heavy coat, something she refused to take off even when it was suffocating her. To Maya, the world was a cage, and she was the only animal willing to bite the hand that fed it. She didn't just break rules, she seemed to enjoy the sound of them shattering. The trouble wasn't that she didn't have a place to live, it was that she refused to live by anyone else's schedule. Her parents, good people who had simply run out of steam, sat at the kitchen table every night with heads in their hands. They tried grounding her. They tried taking away her phone. They tried begging. Nothing worked. Maya was a force of nature, a wildfire that burned just to see the smoke. On a Tuesday night that felt like any other, the fire finally burned through the last bridge. It started over something small, a stolen $20 bill left on the counter. But it wasn't about the money. It was about the disrespect. When her father asked her where it went, Maya didn't lie. She didn't apologize. She just laughed. That laugh was the last straw. Her father didn't yell. He didn't shout. He just stood up, walked to her room, packed a suitcase with the bare minimum, and placed it by the front door. "You aren't welcome here until you decide to be a human being," he said. His voice wasn't angry, it was tired. It was the sound of someone giving up on a dream. Maya stood there for a second, shocked. She expected screaming. She expected a chase. But the silence was worse. She grabbed the suitcase, kicked the door frame on her way out, and screamed that she didn't need them anyway. The door slammed shut, and the sound echoed in the quiet neighborhood like a gunshot. She was free. At first, freedom felt like adrenaline. It felt like speeding down the highway with the windows down. She crashed on friends' couches, moving from one house to another every few days. She lived off cheap pizza and the kindness of people who were too afraid to say no to her. She thought she was winning. She thought she was showing everyone that she didn't need rules to survive. But the nights were getting colder, and the couches were getting harder to find. Friends stopped answering their phones. The fun of being a rebel started to look a lot like just being homeless. But Maya was too proud to go back. Going back would mean admitting they were right, and she would rather starve than do that. So, she started stealing. Small things at first: lipstick, snacks, cash from unlocked cars. It gave her a rush, a temporary feeling of power. But it wasn't enough to fill the empty space in her stomach or the heavy feeling in her chest. She started hanging out with the older crowd, people who didn't ask questions about where she came from or why she was angry. They just wanted to party. One rainy Friday night, the party moved out of the houses and into the streets. Someone handed her the keys to a car that didn't belong to them. "Take it for a spin," they said. "Show us what you got." Maya didn't hesitate. She slid into the driver's seat, the leather cold against her back. The engine roared to life, and for a moment, she felt invincible. She peeled out onto the main road, tires squealing, laughter bubbling up from her throat. She pushed the pedal down, watching the speedometer climb. 50, 60, 70. The town was just a blur of streetlights and rain. Then came the blue and red flashing lights in the rearview mirror. A normal person would have pulled over. A normal person would have felt fear. But Maya wasn't normal anymore. She felt a hot spike of irritation. She wasn't going to let them take this from her. She wasn't going to let anyone control her, not a cop, not her parents, Nobody. She floored it. The chase was short and chaotic. The rain made the road slick, and the car was heavy. She took a corner too fast, the tires losing their grip on the wet pavement. The world outside the window spun in a dizzying circle of dark trees and yellow lines. There was a sickening crunch of metal, the sound of glass shattering like ice, and then, suddenly, total silence. The car had plowed into a muddy ditch. Steam hissed from the crumpled hood, mixing with the cold rain. Maya sat behind the wheel, stunned. Her knuckles were white, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She touched her forehead, her hand came away with a smear of blood, but she didn't feel any pain. She just felt numb. Within minutes, the police were there. They were pulling her out of the car, handcuffing her wrists. They were reading her rights, their voices monotone and professional. They asked if she was okay. They asked if she needed a doctor. Maya didn't answer. She just stared at the wrecked car, the ruin of her momentary freedom. Sitting in the back of the patrol car, watching the rain wash over the windshield, Maya didn't cry. She didn't beg for forgiveness. She looked out at the small town she had terrorized, waiting for someone to come. She expected her mother to be at the station, crying and holding a sweater. She expected her dad to be there, looking disappointed but ready to pay the bail. But when they booked her and put her in a cold holding cell, the benches were empty. The phone on the wall stared back at her, mocking her. She sat there, alone in the fluorescent hum of the station, and for the first time, the silence wasn't satisfying. It was terrifying. She had won her freedom completely. She had pushed everyone away until there was no one left. She sat on the hard bench, hugging her knees to her chest, staring at the concrete wall, realizing that being uncontrollable was the loneliest thing in the world. She was stuck, and for the first time in her life, she had absolutely no idea what to do next. The metal gates of the police station finally slid open, but there was no celebration on the other side. Maya stepped out, pulling her thin jacket tighter around her shoulders. The air was biting cold, and the gray sky looked ready to burst. She had spent the night in a cold cell, sobering up, the adrenaline from the crash long gone, replaced by a throbbing headache and an empty stomach. The officer had handed back her personal belongings, a phone with a cracked screen, a few crumpled dollars, and a set of keys to an apartment she no longer had. She stood on the sidewalk for a long time, waiting. She watched the cars go by, searching for a familiar bumper, praying that maybe, just maybe, her mother or father had softened overnight. But the streets were full of strangers, and every time a car slowed down, her heart leaped, only to sink when it drove past. The realization hit her like a punch to the gut, they weren't coming. She was truly on her own. The rain started slowly, a cold drizzle that felt like needles against her skin. Maya turned up her collar and began to walk. She had no destination, just a need to move. The court had given her a date to return, but they couldn't give her a home. Her friends' houses were out of the question, she had burned too many bridges there, and she wasn't desperate enough to face the "I told you so" looks. She walked until the street lights flickered on, her shoes soaked through, her feet numb. By the time she reached the outskirts of the city, the drizzle had turned into a heavy downpour. She was shivering uncontrollably. That was when she saw it. Just off the highway, tucked between a clump of trees, sat an old, low-slung building. It looked like a diner from a different decade, with flickering neon signs in the window and a small garage attached to the side. The lights were dim, but she could see a warm glow coming from inside. To Maya, it wasn't a business, it was a lifeline. She approached the back door, her mind racing with old habits. She just needed cash for a bus ticket, or maybe just a dry place to hide for an hour. She tried the handle. Locked. She looked around, the parking lot was empty. Peering through the grease-streaked glass of the door, she didn't see anyone. The desperation clawed at her throat. She found a loose brick near the dumpster and hesitated for a split second. This wasn't who she was, she told herself. But the person she used to be was gone. She raised the brick and smashed the glass pane on the door. The sound was startlingly loud, even over the sound of the rain. She reached in, turned the lock, and slipped inside. The air inside was warm and smelled of fried oil and old coffee. It was quiet, peaceful. She shook the glass off her hand and moved toward the counter, her eyes scanning for a cash register. She was so focused on the drawer that she didn't hear the footsteps behind her. Freeze. The voice wasn't loud, it was deep and raspy, like dry leaves rubbing together, but it carried a weight that stopped Maya in her tracks. She spun around, ready to fight, ready to scream, ready to do anything to get away. Standing in the doorway connecting the diner to the kitchen was an old man. He was broad-shouldered, wearing a stained apron over a flannel shirt. His face was weathered, lined with deep wrinkles, and his eyes were a sharp, piercing gray. He didn't hold a weapon, but his presence was more intimidating than any police officer. Maya immediately shifted into defense mode. She straightened her back, clenched her fists, and put on her toughest face. "Back off," she snarled, her voice shaking slightly. "I don't want any trouble." The old man didn't blink. He walked past her, completely ignoring her threat, and locked the front door. Then, he turned the sign in the window to closed. "I said back off," Maya yelled, louder this time. She looked for an exit, but he was blocking the way to the back, and the front was dead-bolted. "You're dripping water all over my floor," the man said calmly. He walked behind the counter, not even looking at her, and picked up a towel. He tossed it to her. It landed on her wet shoulder. Maya stared at him, confused. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. People were supposed to be scared of her. They were supposed to call the cops or run away. "I'm robbing you," she said, trying to regain control of the situation. "Give me the cash." The man ignored her again. He reached into a warmer and pulled out a plate of food. It looked like a burger and fries, simple but steaming hot. He placed it on the counter and pointed to a stool. "Sit." "I'm not sitting down," she spat, though her stomach gave a loud, betraying growl. "You're going to pass out if you don't eat," he said, his voice flat. "And I'm not cleaning up a body off my floor. Sit. Eat." He walked into the kitchen, leaving her alone with the plate. Maya stood there, trembling from cold and anger. She looked at the door, then at the plate. The smell of the food was overwhelming. She hadn't eaten a real meal in 2 days. Slowly, deflated by her own hunger, she climbed onto the stool. She took a bite. It was the best thing she had ever tasted. When the old man came back, he was holding a mug of coffee. He set it down and leaned against the counter, crossing his arms. He watched her eat. There was no pity in his eyes, which was strange. Most adults looked at her with pity or judgment. This man just looked at her like she was a piece of complicated machinery he was trying to figure out. "You broke my door," he said finally. Maya swallowed hard, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand. "I'll pay for it." "You don't have any money," he stated. It wasn't a question. You have nowhere to go. You're wet, you're angry, and you're foolish enough to break into a place that has a security camera right above your head. Maya froze. She looked up and saw the small, blinking red light. Her heart sank. Why didn't you call the cops? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. It's raining, the man said simply. Cops have paperwork to do. I have coffee to brew. He took a sip from his own mug. You can stay here until the rain stops. But if you try to steal anything else, or if you make a mess, I will drag you out into the mud myself. Are we clear? Maya looked at him, searching for a trick. There had to be a trick. But the man just stood there, solid as a rock. For the first time in her life, Maya felt small in front of someone, but she didn't feel hated. She felt seen. It was a terrifying feeling. She nodded slowly. Good, he grunted. Eat your food. She sat there for the next hour, listening to the rain hammer against the glass. The man worked quietly in the kitchen, the clinking of pots and pans the only sound. Maya finished every crumb on her plate. The warmth spread through her body, thawing the ice in her veins. She watched the man's back. He moved slowly, with a deliberate purpose. There was no frantic energy like hers, no angry outbursts. He was just there. When the rain finally slowed to a drizzle, Maya slid off the stool. She felt stronger now, her defenses coming back up. She didn't need charity. She didn't need this old man feeling sorry for her. She walked toward the door, expecting him to stop her, to ask for a favor in return for the meal. He didn't even turn around. You break the lock on the way out, you pay for it, he muttered from the kitchen. Maya paused with her hand on the handle. She looked back at the empty plate, then at the old man. She wanted to say something rude, something to prove she was still in control. But the words died in her throat. Instead, she just pushed the door open and stepped out into the cool night air. She didn't go far, though. She sat on the curb across the street, under the shelter of a bus stop sign, and watched the diner. For some reason, she didn't want to leave. The chaos in her head was quieter there. She pulled her knees to her chest and waited for morning, wondering why a stranger who didn't know her name treated her better than her own family ever had. The morning sun hit Maya's face like a rude awakening. She blinked, her neck stiff from sleeping on the hard wooden bench of the bus stop across the street. The air was damp and smelled of wet asphalt. For a moment, she didn't know where she was, and then the memories of the night before came crashing back. The chase, the holding cell, the diner, the old man. She sat up and looked across the road. The lights of the diner were off, but a pickup truck was parked outside. Through the large glass windows, she could see movement. The old man was inside, flipping chairs onto tables, wiping them down. He moved with a slow, rhythmic pace. He looked like he had been doing the same routine for 100 years. Maya's stomach growled, a deep, hollow sound that reminded her she hadn't eaten anything real since the burger the night before. She checked her pockets. $3 and some change. Not enough for breakfast, not enough for a bus ticket out of town. She felt that familiar itch of panic rising in her chest, the urge to run, to fight, to do something desperate. But she was tired. Her bones ached. She was tired of running. She stood up, brushed the dirt off her jeans, and walked across the street. She didn't know what she was going to say. Maybe she would beg. Maybe she would demand another job. She just knew she couldn't walk away from that warm light. She pushed the door open. The little bell above the frame jingled. The old man didn't look up immediately. He finished wiping the table he was working on, folded the rag neatly, and placed it on the counter. Only then did he turn his gray eyes toward her. "You're still here," he said. It wasn't a question. He didn't look surprised. "I don't have anywhere else to go," Maya said, her voice raspy. She tried to sound tough, like she didn't care, but the tremor in her hands betrayed her. The man nodded once. He walked behind the counter and poured 2 cups of coffee. He pushed one toward her. "Cream sugar." "Black," Maya muttered. She climbed onto the stool, the same one she had sat on the night before. The warmth of the mug seeped into her frozen fingers. "I'm not a charity case," she blurted out suddenly, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "I don't need your pity." "I didn't offer you pity," the man said, blowing on his coffee. "I offered you coffee. There's a difference." He took a sip and looked at her over the rim of the cup. "I need help around here. The diner part runs itself mostly, but the garage, things are piling up. I can't bend like I used to." "You've got energy. You've got anger. That's good fuel for work." Maya narrowed her eyes. "What kind of work?" "Sweeping. Organizing. Moving tires. Scrubbing grease off floors." He listed the tasks like he was reading a grocery list. "Hard work. Boring work. It will make your hands hurt." "And what do I get out of it?" she asked, suspicious. "Meals," he said. "And a place to sleep. I got a cot in the back room. It's not the Ritz, but it's dry. And at the end of the week, if you work hard, I'll pay you $50. Maya stared at him. It was a terrible deal. Minimum wage was higher than that, and the work sounded awful. But looking around at the empty street, the rain clouds gathering in the distance again, she realized she had zero leverage. She was a teenager with a record and no home. "I have rules," the man said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming serious. "You show up on time. You don't steal from me. If you break something, you fix it. And you stay off the drugs and alcohol while you're on my property. If you show up high, you're gone. No second chances." Maya bristled at the word rules. She hated rules, but the smell of bacon cooking in the kitchen made her mouth water. "Fine," she grunted. "I'll do it. But don't think this means you own me." "I don't want to own you, kid," the man said, turning back toward the kitchen. "I just want my floor swept. Go put your stuff in the back. There's a uniform shirt on the box. It might be too big, roll up the sleeves." The work was harder than Maya expected. The garage was a dungeon of dirt and oil. There were tools everywhere: wrenches, sockets, screwdrivers thrown into piles that hadn't been sorted in years. The old man, whose name she still didn't know, pointed to a corner. "Start there," he said. "Sort the metric from the standard. Then scrub the oil stains off the concrete. Use the heavy soap." Maya grabbed a broom and started sweeping. For the first hour, she fumed. She swept with angry aggression, slamming the bristles into the ground, kicking the tires. She wanted him to yell at her. She wanted him to tell her to calm down so she could scream back at him. But he just worked under the hood of a sedan, listening to the radio, completely ignoring her tantrum. By noon, her anger had faded into exhaustion. Her back throbbed. Her fingernails were rimmed with black grease that wouldn't wash off. She sat on an upside-down bucket, wiping sweat from her forehead. The old man walked over, handed her a ham sandwich, and watched her eat. "You're missing a spot," he said, pointing to a patch of grease near her foot. "I'm on my break," she snapped. "He rests who works hard," he quoted. "Eat up. You've got 3 more hours." Days passed, and the routine became a strange sort of torture. Maya woke up, swept, organized, scrubbed, and ate. The old man was a quiet dictator. He didn't shout, but his expectations were higher than anyone she had ever met. If she put a wrench in the wrong bin, he would take it out, hand it to her, and make her put it in the right one without saying a word. It was maddening. She felt like a child, but slowly, she started to take pride in not getting yelled at. About a week into the job, the frustration boiled over. It was a hot, humid afternoon. The air in the garage was thick and suffocating. Maya was trying to loosen a rusted bolt on a tire rim. Her hand slipped, and the wrench skinned her knuckles, drawing blood. "Damn it!" she shouted. She threw the heavy wrench across the garage. It hit the metal wall with a deafening clang, leaving a dent. She stood there, chest heaving, waiting for the explosion. She waited for him to fire her. She waited for him to scream that she was worthless, just like her dad had, just like the teachers at school had. She was ready to fight. The old man walked out of the office. He looked at the dent in the wall. He looked at the wrench on the floor. Then he looked at Maya. His face was calm, almost bored. "Pick it up," he said. "You can't talk to me like that." Maya screamed, tears stinging her eyes. "I quit." "You're a jerk." "I'm leaving." "Pick up the wrench," he said again, his voice steady. "And then get a rag and wipe off the grease you left on the rim. You can quit after you finish the job. You don't leave a job half done." Maya stared at him, her mouth open. He didn't care about her outburst. He didn't care about her feelings. He only cared about the work. It stripped away her power. Her drama meant nothing to him. She stood there for a long minute, trembling. Finally, the fight drained out of her. She walked over, picked up the heavy wrench, and wiped it off. Then she got a rag and cleaned the rim. When she was done, she turned around, expecting him to be gone. He was standing right there. He held out a band-aid. "Put this on your hand. Grease gets in the cuts, makes them infected." Maya took the band-aid, confused. "You're not firing me. Did you finish the rim?" "Yes." "Then no," he said. "There's dinner in the microwave. Leftover meatloaf. Don't throw the plate." He walked back into his office and closed the door. Maya stood alone in the middle of the garage, the band-aid in her hand. She looked at the clean rim. She looked at the dent in the wall. For the first time in her life, she had thrown a fit, and the world hadn't ended. She hadn't been rejected. She had been given a band-aid and told to finish her work. It was a strange feeling. It felt like safety, but it felt heavy. It was the weight of expectation, and she realized, with a start, that she didn't hate it. She wrapped the band-aid around her knuckle, sat down on the bucket, and ate her dinner. The chaos in her head was quiet, replaced by the simple rhythm of the garage. Time works differently in a garage. It isn't measured by clocks or calendars, but by the changing of the oil in the cars, the rotation of the tires, and the slow accumulation of grease under your fingernails. For Maya, 3 months had passed, Yet it felt like a lifetime since she stood in that police holding cell. The girl who used to scream at the sound of her own name was slowly disappearing, replaced by someone quieter, someone stronger. She was learning that machines didn't care about your attitude. If you didn't tighten the bolt, the wheel fell off. If you didn't check the oil, the engine seized. There was a logic to the work that Maya found comforting. It was simple cause and effect. Unlike people, who were confusing and hurtful, a car told you exactly what was wrong if you just listened to it. Her hands had changed, too. They were rough now, coal-used and permanently stained with the black grime of the shop. She wore her hair tied back in a tight knot to keep it out of the gears. She didn't wear the heavy makeup anymore either. She realized she didn't need to paint a mask on her face to face the world. The old man, her boss, had never asked her to change, but the work had demanded it. You can't work with your fists clenched. You have to open your hands to use the tools. It was a Tuesday afternoon, humid and still. Maya was underneath a sedan, tightening the suspension. She was focused, her mind clear. She felt a sense of pride she had never felt before. She was fixing something. She was making something work again. The old man was in the office, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound besides the clank of her wrench. Then, the peace was shattered. The sound of engines cut through the air, but they weren't the healthy purr of the cars they fixed. These were loud, aggressive, and modified to sound like thunder. 3 cars screeched into the gravel lot, blocking the entrance. The dust cloud they kicked up drifted into the open garage door. Maya froze. She knew that sound. She knew that style of driving. Her heart, which had been so steady for weeks, suddenly jumped into her throat. She slid out from under the car on the mechanic's creeper and sat up. 4 guys got out of the cars. They were dressed in baggy clothes, hoods up, leaning against their vehicles with a practiced laziness that screamed trouble. Maya recognized the leader immediately. It was the guy she used to hang out with, the one who handed her the keys the night she crashed. He looked exactly the same, angry eyes, a smirk that didn't reach his lips. Well, he said, his voice carrying across the lot. Look at little Maya. Playing mechanic. The other guys laughed. It was a nasty sound. Maya stood up, wiping her hands on a rag. She tried to look calm, but she could feel the old panic bubbling up. Her hands started to shake. This was the life she had run away from. It had found her. She's real cute in that uniform, another one sneered. Hey, Maya. You owe us. You remember that night the cops came looking for you? We had to talk our way out of it. You cost us. Maya took a step back, toward the toolbox, looking for something heavy. Her instinct was to run, but there was nowhere to go. They blocked the exit. She felt the rage boiling in her blood, the familiar feeling of being trapped. I don't owe you anything, she said, but her voice sounded weak. The leader walked forward, stepping into the garage. You think you're better than us now, you think you're special because you work with this old fossil. He spit on the concrete floor near her feet. Get in the car, Maya. We're going for a ride. I'm not going anywhere, Maya said, gripping a wrench so hard her knuckles turned white. She was ready to swing. She was ready to fight, even though she knew she would lose. Then, the door to the office opened. The old man walked out. He wasn't holding a weapon. He wasn't running. He was holding a clipboard and a pen. He looked at the mess on his floor, then at the boys, and finally at Maya. He didn't look scared. He looked annoyed, like he had found a dent in a fender he was trying to repair. "She clocked out 5 minutes ago," the old man said. His voice was calm, cutting through the tension like a knife through hot butter. "Whatever business you have with her, it's not on company time." The leader turned to the old man, puffing out his chest. "Old man, you don't want to get involved. This isn't your business. Step aside." The old man didn't move an inch. He was shorter than the younger man, but he seemed to take up more space. He looked at the boy with eyes that had seen everything. "You are blocking my exit. You are harassing my employee. And you are trespassing." "We're leaving," the leader said, pointing a finger at Maya. "She's coming with us." "No," the old man said. "She isn't." "Who's going to stop us?" the leader asked, stepping forward, pushing his chest against the old man's shoulder. The old man didn't flinch. He simply reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He pressed a single button and held it up. "I just dialed 911. I haven't pressed the call button yet. But I have a camera right there," he pointed to the security camera above the door, "recording everything. You touch me, or her, and you go to jail for assault. You touch my property, and you go to jail for vandalism. I know your faces, and I have your license plates." The smirk faded from the leader's face. The bravado collapsed. They were tough guys who ruled by fear, but they were cowards when it came to real consequences. The police were the one thing they couldn't fight. The old man stared at them, his finger hovering over the call button. "You have 10 seconds to get off my property." The leader looked at his friends, then at the phone, then at Maya. He hesitated. Maya held her breath, watching the old man's back. He was protecting her, not with a gun or a fist, but with rules. He was using the system she had always hated to save her. "Fine," the leader spat. "She's not worth it anyway." They piled back into their cars, engines revving loudly as they peeled out of the lot, kicking up more dust. The silence rushed back in, heavy and ringing. Maya let out a breath she felt like she'd been holding for months. Her legs gave out, and she sat down hard on the concrete floor. The wrench clattered out of her hand. She was shaking all over, tears streaming down her face before she even realized she was crying. The old man walked over to her. He didn't crouch down or hug her. He just stood there, looking at the tire tracks left in the gravel. "Did they hurt you?" Maya shook her head, wiping her nose on her sleeve. "No, I was so scared. I wanted to hurt them. I wanted to smash their faces in." "I know," the old man said. He turned and walked to the small fridge in the corner, taking out 2 sodas. He came back and sat down on a crate next to her, handing her one. "It takes a long time to stop being a scared animal, Maya. You grow claws because you think you need them to survive." He popped the tab on his soda. "But you don't need them here. You don't have to fight everyone to be safe. Sometimes, the strongest thing you can do is just stand still." Maya looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time. She realized that in the past, when she was acting out and screaming for attention, people just pushed her away. They gave up on her. But this man, this stranger, had stood between her and the danger without thinking twice. He didn't try to fix her by changing her clothes or her hair. He fixed her by giving her a place where she didn't have to be afraid. "Why did you do that?" she asked, her voice cracking. "I'm just a messed up kid. I could have robbed you that first night." "You're not messed up," the old man said, taking a sip of his drink. You're just a engine that's been running too hot for too long. You just needed someone to let you cool down. They sat there for a long time, the sun going down, the crickets starting to chirp in the bushes outside. Maya wasn't just an angry girl anymore. She was someone who had been saved, not by a miracle, but by a man who refused to let her destroy herself. She took a sip of the cold soda, the bubbles popping on her tongue, and for the first time in her life, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt full. The calendar on the wall of the small office had flipped through every season, from the cold rain of that first night to the humid heat of summer, and finally back to the crisp air of autumn. It had been exactly 1 year since Maya walked into this garage, a wild, frightened animal with nowhere to go. As she stood in the center of the shop floor, looking around at the tidy tools and the clean concrete, she almost didn't recognize the place. It looked the same, yet entirely different. And she knew, with a deep certainty, that she was the one who had changed the most. Maya was no longer the girl who threw wrenches at walls. She wasn't the girl who screamed to make herself heard. Over the last 12 months, the fire inside her hadn't gone out, it had just been contained. She learned to use that energy to turn bolts, to lift heavy tires, to solve problems. Her anger had turned into focus. She had even taken the high school equivalency test at the local community college, studying late at night under the buzzing fluorescent light of the back room while the old man snored in his chair. She passed with flying colors. But she knew she couldn't stay in the back room forever. She had saved almost every dollar the old man had paid her. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough. She had found a small apartment across town, a studio with a window that let in the morning sun. It was hers. She had signed the lease yesterday, her hand shaking not from fear, but from the weight of the responsibility. Today was her last day at the garage. She walked out to the bay where her car was parked. It was the same old sedan she had helped fix months ago, the one she had bought from a salvage yard for next to nothing. It wasn't flashy. It didn't turn heads. But the engine purred like a contented cat. She had rebuilt the transmission herself. She knew every inch of this car, every wire, every pipe. It was reliable. It was safe. It was everything she used to think was boring, but now, it was her most prized possession. The old man came out of the office, carrying a small, grease-stained envelope. He handed it to her. It was her final paycheck, and a little extra he had tucked in. "You're all packed up?" he asked. He didn't look sad. He looked the way he always looked, calm, steady, like a rock in a river. "Yeah," Maya said, taking the envelope. "I put the cot away. Clean the fridge. There's a frozen pizza in the freezer for dinner." The old man nodded. "Good. That was a good pizza." Maya looked at him, searching for the right words. How do you thank someone who saved your life without making a big deal out of it? How do you explain that he was the first person who didn't try to change her, but instead gave her a reason to change herself? I don't know. Maya started, her voice catching slightly. She cleared her throat. "I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't opened that door that night." The old man waved his hand dismissively. "You would have figured it out. Eventually." "No," Maya shook her head firmly. "I wouldn't. I was going to crash. I was going to end up dead or in jail for real. You didn't just give me a job. You didn't just give me food. You gave me space. You let me be angry until I got tired of being angry." The old man leaned against the hood of a nearby truck. He looked at her with those sharp gray eyes. "Maya, people think control is about cages. They think it's about locking someone up so they can't move. That's not control. That's just trapping an animal. Real control is about having a steering wheel. You didn't need a cage. You just needed to learn how to drive. Maya smiled. It was a genuine smile, one that reached her eyes. I guess I'm a pretty good driver now. You're all right, the old man grunted, a tiny smile twitching at the corner of his mouth. You work hard. You learn fast. You'll be okay. He pushed himself off the truck and held out his hand. Maya looked at his rough, scarred hand, then at her own cleaner now, but still strong. She didn't shake his hand. Instead, she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him in a quick, tight hug. He stiffened for a second, surprised, and then patted her awkwardly on the back. All right, he muttered. Get out of here before you make me cry. She laughed, pulling away. She grabbed her keys from the hook on the wall. I'll come by, she said. I'll bring coffee. I'll check on the tires. You do that, he said, turning back toward the office. Keep your head on straight. Maya climbed into her car. The seat was worn, the steering wheel familiar. She put the key in the ignition and turned it. The engine roared to life, a sound that used to mean running away, but now meant moving forward. She put the car in gear and drove out of the garage. As she pulled onto the main road, she glanced in the rearview mirror. The old man was standing in the open bay door, watching her go. He raised a hand in a single wave. Maya raised hers back, then turned her eyes to the road ahead. The town looked different from behind the wheel. It didn't look like a cage anymore. It looked like a place with opportunities. It looked like a place where she could get a job at a bigger shop, maybe even open her own garage one day. The fear that used to sit in the passenger seat next to her was gone. In its place was a quiet confidence. She rolled down the window. The air was cool, but it felt good against her face. She wasn't running away from her parents, or the police, or her past. She was driving toward her own life. She realized that being uncontrollable was never about freedom, it was just being blown around by the wind. Now, she had her hands on the wheel. She was the one deciding where to turn. She pressed down on the gas just a little, feeling the power of the engine she had built with her own hands. She wasn't a wildfire anymore. She was the engine. She was the driver. And for the first time in her life, the future didn't feel like something to be afraid of. It felt wide open, just like the highway stretching out in front of her.